My name is Elena Carter. I am 25 years old, and I still remember the exact moment my child stopped smiling in his own home. It was supposed to be a family dinner, nothing special, just a Sunday evening at my mother-in-law's house. But that night, something broke in a way I can never forget. She had set the table perfectly. 7 plates, 7 chairs, everything balanced, everything controlled, except my son. He stood quietly beside me, holding his little toy car in one hand, waiting for his place, waiting to belong. But he never got one. My mother-in-law smiled and said something I will never forget. "There are 7 seats. This table is for real children." Real children. My son blinked slowly, like he didn't understand the meaning, but still felt the pain. I looked at her, waiting for someone to say she was joking, but nobody did. Then she did something worse. She picked up a small plate, walked to the side door, and placed it near the floor, right next to the laundry area, and said calmly, "He can eat there." My child didn't move. He just looked at me. That silent look children give when they are asking, "Did I do something wrong?" I knelt down beside him and said softly, "You did nothing wrong." But my voice was shaking, because I didn't understand how a child could be treated like an extra in his own family. My husband was there. I turned toward him, waiting, begging silently for him to speak, but he just stared at the table, avoiding everything, avoiding us. And that silence hurt more than her words. So my son walked, slowly, to the door, where the plate was placed, like he had already accepted his position in that house, outside the circle, outside the family, and I watched him sit there, eating quietly, by the floor, while the real family ate at the table. Something inside me broke, not loudly, not dramatically, quietly, but permanently. I stood up, and for the first time, I didn't ask for permission to speak. I said, "Why is my son eating on the floor?" My voice was calm, too calm, that kind of calm before a storm that nobody sees coming. My mother-in-law didn't even look at me. She simply said, "This is our house, and we decide who belongs where." Belongs. That word hit harder than anything else. I looked at my husband again, and I asked him one simple question. "Are you okay with this?" He stayed silent, for a few seconds too long, and that silence answered everything. Then finally, he said something I never expected. "Mom is just old-fashioned. Don't make it a big issue." Not support, not protection, just avoidance. And that was the moment I understood something clearly. I wasn't fighting one person. I was fighting acceptance of disrespect. I walked toward my son, picked up his plate, and brought him back to the table. I placed him in the empty chair, and I said, "He eats here. If he eats anywhere, I eat nowhere." The room went silent. No forks moving, no voices, just shock. My mother-in-law stood up, angry now. "This is disrespect." I looked at her and said, "No. Disrespect is what you did to a 7-year-old child." Then I turned to my husband and said something that changed everything. "If you cannot protect him in this house, then don't expect him to call it home." That night we left. No shouting, no drama, just silence. The kind that ends things permanently. But what I didn't know then was that this was only the beginning, because the next morning my husband called me, and what he said changed everything I thought I knew about that family. That night we came back home in silence. My son didn't speak a single word. He just held my hand tighter than usual, like he was afraid to let go. And I kept thinking, how do you explain to a 7-year-old that he did nothing wrong but still wasn't treated right? My husband didn't say anything in the car, not one word, Just silence. Heavy, uncomfortable, avoidant silence. And I already knew what that meant. He wasn't processing what happened. He was trying to justify it. When we reached home, I put my son to bed. He didn't ask questions. He just closed his eyes slowly. But before sleeping, he said something very soft. "Mom, am I bad?" That one sentence broke something inside me completely. I held his face and said, "No, baby, you are perfect." But my voice cracked, because I knew he didn't fully believe me yet. Later that night, my husband finally spoke, not to me at first, but on the phone. I overheard his voice from the kitchen. He was calling his mother. "What did you think you were doing today?" His tone was different, not angry, conflicted. I walked closer, and then I heard her voice through the speaker. "Don't exaggerate, the boy is fine. I just set boundaries." Boundaries, that word again, used to justify cruelty. Then my husband said something I didn't expect. "She's not speaking to me right now, because of this." There was a pause, and then his mother replied coldly, "Then maybe she's not the right woman for this family." That sentence changed the air in the room, because I finally understood something clearly. This was not a misunderstanding. This was a belief system. My husband ended the call and stood there for a long time, not looking at me, not looking at anything, just standing in his own confusion. Then he finally said, "I didn't think it was that serious." That sentence, "I didn't think," that's what hurt the most, because it meant he saw it, but didn't value it. I looked at him and asked, "If your son was sitting by the door, would it still not be serious?" Silence. Again. And then I made a decision. Not loud, not emotional, just final. I will never allow my child to feel like he doesn't belong in his own home. He looked up, but didn't respond, because he knew I wasn't asking permission. I was stating reality. The next morning, I took my son out for breakfast, just the two of us. No tension, no judgment, just warmth. And for the first time in days, he smiled again, small, but real. And I knew something had already shifted, not in him, not in me, but in the direction of everything that was about to happen next. Because silence in families never stays silent for long. It always comes back louder. 2 days passed after that night, but nothing felt normal anymore. Silence in the house wasn't peaceful. It was heavy, like everyone was waiting for something to break. My husband was different now. Not loud, not defensive, just distant, like he was thinking too much and avoiding thinking at the same time. Then came the call. His mother wanted us to come over. "Talk properly," she said. But I already knew this wasn't going to be a conversation. It was going to be a justification. We went, and the moment I entered that house, I felt it again. The same energy, the same hierarchy, the same invisible rules. My mother-in-law was sitting at the table, calm, composed, like nothing had happened, like my son had never been made to sit by the door. She looked at me and said, "You are making this bigger than it is." I didn't respond. I was watching her carefully now, not emotionally, logically. Then she continued, "In this family, we teach children discipline, not entitlement." Discipline. Again. A word used to hide control. I finally spoke. My voice was calm, almost too calm. "You called a 7-year-old child not real enough to sit at a table." Silence. My husband shifted in his seat. He still hadn't chosen a side, but his silence was starting to feel like one. Then I said something that changed the room. "If this is normal for you, then my son will never be normal here." Her face changed slightly. For the first time, irritation broke through her control. She replied, "Then maybe this marriage is the problem." That sentence landed differently, Because now it wasn't about the child, it was about me. I looked at my husband, and this time I didn't ask. I said, "Are you going to let her decide how your son is treated?" He didn't answer immediately. That pause told me everything. Then finally he said, "She is my mother," and stopped there, because he realized that sentence was not enough anymore. I nodded slowly, not angry, just done. I stood up and said, "I didn't marry into a house where my child needs permission to exist." Then I picked up my bag and walked toward the door. Behind me, I heard my husband say, "Wait!" But I didn't stop, because sometimes waiting is just another word for staying where you are not respected. That night, we didn't fix anything. We didn't resolve anything. We simply learned the truth. And the truth was this: either my child belongs everywhere I go, or I don't belong there at all. 2 weeks later, life didn't explode. It just changed direction, quietly, permanently. After that night, I stopped going back to that house. Not because I was told to leave, but because I finally understood something important. My child's peace was not negotiable. At first, my husband kept calling. Missed calls, messages, voicemails, all the things that should have been said before, not after. But I didn't respond immediately, because now I was watching actions, not words. Then, one evening, he showed up, outside our apartment, standing there, tired, confused, like someone who finally understood too late. He said softly, "I didn't know how to handle it." And I looked at him, really looked at him, and replied, "You didn't have to handle it alone. You just had to stand with us." Silence, because he knew that was true. Then he said something different this time. "I spoke to my mother." I didn't react. I already knew where this was going. He continued, "She says she didn't mean it like that." And I interrupted him, not loudly, just clearly. That's the problem. If it needs explaining, it already crossed a line. That hit him. I could see it. For the first time, he didn't defend her. He just stood there, quiet, broken in his own realization. And then he said something that mattered. "I don't want my son to grow up thinking this is normal." That was the first sentence I had waited for. Not excuses, not delays, just clarity. But I still didn't go back, because understanding something is not the same as changing it. I told him, "Then prove it." Not with words, not with promises, with boundaries. And I walked back inside, leaving him standing there with the truth he could no longer ignore. Because now, the real story wasn't about what happened at the table. It was about what happens next, when someone finally decides what kind of family they want their child to grow up in.